What's up, everyone? Welcome to Security Squawk Podcast. I'm Brian Horning. I have Randy Bryan here with me today. Andre's, again, taking the week off. We're going to have a talk with him about that. What do you think, Randy?
Yeah, we really need to talk to him about that. Hopefully he's watching. We can give him a hard time while we're doing the show.
Yeah, why not? So if you're out there, Andre, get back here in the studio recording. We know you're on vacation, but we need you here. There's a lot of things going on. So welcome to the podcast that talks about the business of cybersecurity. The goal of the podcast is to educate as many people as we can about cybersecurity. And hopefully people start to learn some things and take some personal responsibility around their own cybersecurity and really start to understand what the threats are and how they can protect themselves. This isn't a tech podcast. Although we have a pretty decent audience from our MSP community, we really break this stuff down to layman's terms, to levels everyone can understand. So you can, even if you are an employee of a company and you might not own a business, you can still do things to help protect, your job, your company, where you work, the data, the customer data that you're entrusted with, all that good stuff. So real quick, remember, Randy and I don't get paid for the show. We do this out of the goodness of our heart. We take time out of our day to educate everybody. So if you learn something, share on our podcast. That's all we ask for you. Share it out to your friends and family. Let them know that this exists. It's simple. You just go to your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, Audible. We're in like a million places. Just grab the link from there, share it out, and let people know that they should be listening to a podcast where they can learn cybersecurity and learn what's going on out there and how they can protect themselves. So that's it for me. You guys are awesome, helping us grow the channel. We got the stats. We're growing every single time we upload an episode. And this is episode 30 for us, dude. Can you believe it?
Yeah, I can believe it, especially since it's like my fifth one. So.
Yeah, you are totally accurate on that, but we are happy that you decided to take the plunge and join us on this endeavor. So today we're going to talk about just a real quick update on some things around the 4th of July Kaseya VSA ransomware attack. We're going to dive into that and update everybody a little bit on what's going on with with Kaseya, what's going on with Biden and Putin, and what's going on with REvil, the group behind the attack. And then we're going to jump in on the second half of the podcast. We're going to get into what companies and what people need to do to start really protecting themselves, as told by our friends over at CISA. We brought it up last week on the show. We talked about a chart, I guess, or some kind of infographic that they put out. And we're going to pull that up and we're going to go through what they're saying, analyze it, and break it down for you so you understand it and really understand, what advice CISA is giving everyone out there. So that's what the show is going to look like. But before we get into that content, how'd your week go, Randy? What's new?
Not much new around here. Just keeping up with everything that's going on. There's a lot of good stuff we're going to talk about today, and I'm pretty excited to get into it. You did mention that we're not officially a tech podcast. I think as tech people, though, we ought to sometimes be careful, because sometimes we use words that nobody knows what they are, especially 3-letter acronyms. So anyway, it's great to be here today. No, yeah, exactly. No, but it's great to be here today. I'm excited about getting started on this content.
Yeah, I am too. I had an interesting week. People don't know. I'm really enjoying this whole thing that I decided to start doing with the press, right? So I've been in the press a lot lately, helping people understand what the heck is going on out there. CNN, Forbes, Fortune. I've been on a lot of local news stations. I met with an industry magazine yesterday that's doing a big, or that was Monday, doing a big kind of expose on cybersecurity that I'm going to be quoted in a lot. I was phone with BBC News yesterday for about an hour and a half, talking to them about ransomware and cyber attacks. So
Wow, that's awesome.
it's really cool for me to go through this and really the attention that this is garnering and all this stuff, because this is important stuff and it's important to me. And I feel like I can educate people and help them. That's why I'm doing this. That's why you're going to see me in the news even more. You develop these relationships with these reporters and, word spreads, referrals, people talk, and other reporters are reaching out to you, asking you for insight and quotes on things. So it's really cool because I got to share my insights, not just on ransomware, but other aspects of technology and cybersecurity as a result of all this. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So, look for me in a local media publication near you, because, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of success around that. And I'm happy that I have that platform to do that. So that's about it. It's been my exciting week is talking to a lot of reporters. So
that's really awesome, man.
It's fun. It is fun. It's different. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did. And I honestly didn't think that people would want to hear from me as much as they're asking. So it's cool in both respects. So let's jump right into it. I'm not going to bring up an article. Let's what do you know since the last time we talked in the last week? Let's just talk about Kaseya first. What the hell is going on over at that company? Where are their partners? What do you know?
Man, I've heard a lot of people being concerned about at Kaseya lack of priority on cybersecurity, and this is not something that I can verify firsthand. I just hear a lot of people, a lot of chatter. People are concerned, over, and this is all stuff that's going to have to be talked about because this is such a big hack. But people being concerned, was Kaseya making security a top priority? Were they doing the things that they needed to do? Those are questions that people want to know and that are going to have to be asked and answered. And then also, just everything with them keeping up to date and all of that. And I know they were offline with their on-prem servers. When did they finally come back online? Was it Sunday?
They're hosted.
Yes.
I believe they were in the process on Monday, getting everybody back online. Right. I know at 4:00, I had happened to look Monday around 4:00 Eastern, and I think I read that they were about 95% back up. And then, for the people that host their own, the on-prem people, I think it's just basically when they can get through the process of securing everything and updating the patch, and it's kind of on them to get back up and running.
I hear a lot of chatter also, people wanting to make sure that other Kaseya products are given the budget and the priority that they need to make sure that their products are also secure.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kaseya is going to take a beating over this, but quite frankly, they're not the only ones that have this problem. And, nobody should take this as an opportunity to beat that company up, because I'm sure if we shined a spotlight on other companies, we would, find similar things. I will add to what you said real quickly, because I was a programmer in a former life when I worked for the Department of Defense. And the code base that was being used in Kaseya that I believe was part of the exploit, or at least during the process of evaluating how this could have happened, the folks over at Mandiant FireEye discovered a code base known as ASP Classic, which is a very old version of a programming language. I used it back in 1999 when I worked for the Navy, and then I stopped using it in 2002, and I left the Navy in 2004. So we were 2 years into .NET, ASP.NET, which was the follow-on after Classic ASP was retired. And, it's been about 15, 17 years now since ASP Classic was officially, deprecated. by Microsoft, basically saying that we're no longer going to support this, and you really shouldn't
Right.
be doing it. And this was something that was found to be in the production code base of the Kaseya VSA software. You're talking 20 plus year old code. So these are the types of things that we're going to find as we see software companies get hacked like this, like we see with SolarWinds, like we see with Kaseya, but they weren't attacked the same way. I'm not here saying that. SolarWinds was attacked by code being able to be legitimately or put in legitimate software by people who had access to the network related to SolarWinds product development.
Could have been a programmer's computer.
Right. This was basically taking advantage of vulnerability within software that runs kind of publicly out on the internet. So if anything, this should go and show you or make people aware of the fact that these cyber criminals have a vast array of skills to try to attack companies, right? It's not just one thing that they're doing over and over again and being successful. They're being successful because they have a wide skill set that they can pull from, whether it's different people or super geniuses that just know how to do this crap. I know people that know how to do all this crap. I know people that are very good. They know how to do all these different things. They know how to penetrate networks. They know how to penetrate software. They're rare breeds. But it just goes to show you that it's not one thing. But what we are seeing on the company side is that there's basically, I think we said it a lot on the podcast the last time. This is cybersecurity 101 type stuff that these companies are missing. And when, it's that old saying in this business, right? They only need to be right one time and they're in. We have to be right all the time, right? So, and that's the challenge that companies are up against. They have to be right and have to protect things all the time. Go ahead.
The big issue, at least for Kaseya, what this brings up is that every single line of code that a company uses they need to bring in a security company now and go over it. And this is actually what you mentioned about this old chunk of code from ASP. That's actually pretty common. That type of thing, if they're not careful, of people having stuff in their bag of tricks. They hire a programmer, they've got a bag of tricks they use, or maybe some old software from 1995, that was responsible for monitoring hard drives. That company gets bought up, the software gets sucked into something else, that gets sucked into something else. And I just made that up, by the way. But next thing you know, 20 years later, that little component is now part of VSA, and then boom, it's a vulnerability. And I wanted to clarify that the vulnerability thing is pretty scary because it may even tie back to the SolarWinds leak, because with the SolarWinds leak, they were able to get source code. We know from Microsoft that they pulled the source code for Exchange, and then they found vulnerabilities, and then not this group but other groups, they exploited that. So how did they find this vulnerability? How did they know that it was there? It is some old code from the 90s. How did they know that it was there? Bottom line is these companies really are going to have to up their game and get their code.
The question, I monitor a lot of things, and I even heard people go as far, and I'm not saying I agree with this, I'm bringing it up because you kind of alluded to it in what you just said there, but we talked about on the podcast last week the Netherlands company that tipped off Kaseya about this particular problem, right? And in the time that they disclosed it to Kaseya, and Kaseya supposedly started working on it, cyber criminals were able to figure out the same thing. Now, did they figure it out, or were they tipped off?
Right.
Is somebody, was somebody who's in the know within that company in the Netherlands or at Kaseya?
Right.
And then there was a report that also came out, I believe, earlier this week that basically stated that what was it that there were like 5 employees, ex-employees of Kaseya, that were sounding the alarms of security. I know I saw a story like that. So, I think Kaseya will be all right. I don't, people don't know all the VC and who's backing all these companies, and I would venture to say that a lot of this is going to lead to a lot of consolidation with who owns these different companies, because some of these companies are owned by the same VC company, or we might start to see pressure on these VCs from the government to not have these types of investments, because they only care about the monetary, the
Right.
money side of it. They don't care about the security, and maybe that's not such a good idea. Somebody had asked me recently if this was like a Ma Bell type of situation, right? Who knows? It could be, but I do want to say, and I want to wrap up talking about Kaseya so we can kind of move into talking about our evil and what's going on with the government's handling of this. But I don't know. I would have to say that I cover a lot of cyber attacks on my YouTube channel, and I cover a ton of them. And I always talk about how companies, especially in the beginning, don't do a great job handling these situations. I see 2 camps. Either they don't give enough information or they give too much. And I think Kaseya fell into the giving too much information, trying to do damage control. I think their heart was in the right place, but I think some of the messaging didn't help their case. I'm just going to say it that way. So what are your thoughts on Kaseya?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I know that they may have said too much, but saying too much helps. Okay, so I'm not saying they should have said too much, but I know that if you're open and forthright, it helps to rebuild trust. So, they may be okay after this. I personally am really enjoying the fact that they've been open about talking about it, and have been forthright. Maybe they have been saying too much. I'm not sure on that, but it's to me, it's better than not saying anything at all.
So moving on to our continue kind of what's related to this. So the fallout from the Kaseya attack obviously has gotten the attention of lawmakers and has prompted a phone call from President Biden to Russian President Vladimir Putin. I believe the phone call took place last Friday, and it did. It was it's right here in the article. And he wants them to take action to stop persistent ransomware attacks against the U.S. and said there will be consequences. So we went from the post G7 summit that these two had, where he gave them the list of 16 critical infrastructure areas that were off limits. We saw a hospital attack. We saw IT companies attack. We saw local governments attacked as a result of the Kaseya attack, which are all on that list. And he made a phone call. So where do you think we're at with this?
Well, I can tell you where I hope we're not at. I hope we're not at the infamous red line in the sand like we had in, I think it was Syria about 10 or 15 years ago, that really didn't go anywhere and it really wasn't enforced. I mean, if you're going to call and you're going to say something like this to a leader of another country, you've got to be willing to back it up, and you can't just be, saying things to look good or whatever. I think at the same time, it seems like he said it in a way, that Putin can still save face. A lot of these countries, that's real important that you let them save face if you're going to get them to go along with it. Bottom line is a lot of this stuff is originating from basically their territory. So, it would be extremely helpful to have them helping with keeping this under control. just like if they were originating from the US. I mean, you and I would expect, without even a second thought, if it was originating out of the US, we would want our government involved, and we would want our government going after them because they're criminals. It's against the law to do this kind of stuff. So, we should expect the same from another country.
Yep. And one of the things that I'm kind of picking up on this is the fact that one of the things that Putin had said early on is that he wasn't going to do anything because the U.S. isn't providing enough information on who these people are, or enough evidence, right? And it's interesting because in the article it points out that Biden said, I made it very clear to him that the United States expects when a ransomware operation is coming from his soil, even though it's not sponsored by the state, we expect him to act, given enough information to act on who that is. So that would lead you to believe that they gave him information on who that was. So it's interesting because, the next article that I want to go into is that the various websites that this our evil hacking group uses are mysteriously down, and nobody really knows why. So I'm going to pop that up on the screen here. But major Russian-speaking ransomware gang behind JBS and Kaseya attack goes offline, right? So not only did their happy blog, where they kind of release all the information of who they attacked or who's not negotiating with them, so here's all their information, that site is down, but also this, and that's one thing for that site to go down, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but the payment sites are also reported being down. So when you get hit with ransomware, you have that text file on your system, and it gives you a wallet address to send money to, and there's chat servers and communication servers where you can communicate with these guys. These have all been taken offline, or at least a number of them have been taken offline. Any thoughts on that, or what could be going on here?
I mean, like we were discussing in the green room, I mean, it could be several things. It could just be the natural course of things. But potentially, I don't want to get too excited here or offer too much extra hope, but maybe something came out of that last call with Biden and Putin. And, maybe the Russians have started to do something about it. I'm not real hopeful there because, I didn't mention this a minute ago, but I've read that that's actually a source of income for them. So, if it is, I don't know. I don't even know if that's true. But I have heard that.
Source of income for who? I missed that.
For the Russians.
Oh, okay, got it.
That's some of this, it's going to end up in somebody's pocket. Not just our evil, It could also be that, so maybe that happened. It could also be, we've heard a lot of chatter or whatever you want to call it the last few weeks. We mentioned it on the podcast, I think 2 weeks ago, about how the FBI and other U.S. agencies are talking about having the ability to strike back. And, we've always kind of kept our cards close to our chest about these things. And, maybe some government agency from the U.S. has, basically reached out back to them. And I know that our evil's most vulnerable time was while they were in these networks for a counterattack. Maybe something happened then, and maybe boom, they've been taken down. But then, bottom line, this also could just be the natural course of things, because these groups, if they get too famous, they are known to go dark, and then, they basically rebrand themselves. So right now they're our evil, and, they might come back, in a month under a totally different name. I don't know, but it seems like a kind of bad timing, because I don't know that anybody from Kaseya has paid them money yet. If they have, I don't think they've made it public, have they? I haven't read that.
I'm not aware of any type of payment. And last I saw, they were still negotiating, and the number was down to like 50 million.
So it seems bad timing to take your payment servers offline.
Well, not only that, it's also like, as this article says, Rebel's blog site as well, or R-Evil's blog site, as well as other R-Evil sites used to host decryptor programs. So like, if you pay the ransom and you got to go somewhere to download the decryptor, those servers are now down too. Right?
Maybe they got ransomware from someone else.
That would be funny.
Ba-dum-bum-bum.
but I don't think ransomware would take down these Tor servers. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
You know, it would hit their computers and stuff. And payment processing were all offline around 1 a.m. You know, this was on Tuesday, so this is like 3 or 4 days after Biden made the phone call to Putin, which we just talked about. So, a couple of things here. I like to compare the dark web to like the real web in 1997. So if anybody was alive and like dial-up internet and surfing the internet in 1997, that's kind of like what the dark web is today. The websites don't look that great, mainly because they're, you know, geeky engineers that slap them together, not designers, so to speak. It's one reason. But a lot of these sites are just, and servers, and the way that the Tor and the browsers work and everything, it's not uncommon for servers to go offline for, you know, 2 or 3 days and then come back up. That could be what is happening here. I seriously doubt it. Just because these other servers are also offline and they all went offline around the same time, leads me to believe that they were either attacked in some way, or the people in charge decided that the heat was getting too hot in the kitchen, and we just need to lay low for a little while.
Time to rebrand.
Or not necessarily. I've seen them come back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just the server's back up, right? And they went away for a little while, but now it's back up. It could very well be that affiliates that are close to the center of the organization have been visited by authorities, either Russian authorities or who knows who. And that was just enough to get these guys to just retreat a little bit and say, mm-hmm. you know, hey, we're going to just shut this stuff down right now. I kind of believe that this means that they're not going to get paid.
What if Kaseya already paid them, and that's why they went dark?
I feel like Kaseya should tell everybody if they paid them, because
I would hope so.
Because then the key would be out there, and maybe they are working with their partners and they are giving them a key. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But we're going to find out what happens eventually. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
We're only a few days from when they disappeared. We're only about 2 weeks from the actual attack at this point. And there's a lot to be figured out still. You know, we're all going to find out, and we're all going to, you know, hopefully be better because of it. But that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, Revel's missing, and we don't know, because nobody's coming forward and taking, you know, boasting or taking responsibility that they did something, which, you know, if I really look at things and say, what could be going on here? That's more how Russia operates. So if anything, maybe the Russians kind of told these guys, like, all right, you're causing way too much noise. Like, you got JBS, now you got Kaseya, a month and a half later, like, chill. You know what I mean? Like, or this business is going to go away and you're not going to make any money, right? Because the laws are going to get so strict and everybody's going to just, you know, the pendulum's swinging this way and it's going to swing back so hard that way that it's just going to blow this whole thing up.
Right.
From the way that they're doing it, right? It'll go back to the way it was. Loose groups, guys here and there hitting you up for 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 20,000, but you're not going to see these big hits for millions of dollars like we're seeing right now. It's kind of where I'm at with it. So you ready to jump into some education?
Yeah.
Nice. All right, let me stop this, and then we're going to talk about. We're going to educate people on these top mitigation techniques, and I'm going to let you kind of lead this one, and I will jump in. Which one do I want to share here? That one.
Probably the top of page 2. There's a good summary on the top of page 2.
Yeah, I got it up. Let me try to blow it up so people can actually see this. So we got these mitigation techniques, right, that CISA has released. Interesting that they go after application developer guidance for the first thing here. And we can go through the stats after we go through these top mitigation techniques if we have time. But basically, they're saying is these are the top techniques that hackers use to get in, and here's what you guys can do to better protect yourself and not get attacked the same way that we see other companies get attacked.
Right.
Down below here, they have it grouped by different sections, and they have a percentage of how often we see this as the attack vector. So this is good information, but just understand this is in-time data. This can change at any minute, right? Something may be figured out where brute force becomes 12% and not 1.5%. Right. So all of this can move up and down, but right now at this point in time, this is kind of what we're seeing in terms of how hackers are getting in, and how they're moving around networks, how they're able to do things. This one is an interesting one. This is something I have been getting smarter on, I should say, in the last couple months, is this whole patch the hash thing and how hackers can move in a network without really having a username and password. And there's certain things that you can do here to prevent this type of behavior, and I'll try to cover that. But this is a very interesting, and I'm not surprised to see it at 30%, because it is something that we see a lot in our own work here at Exact IT. So the first thing they're going to recommend here, Randy, is provide secure software best practice guidance and training to application developers to avoid introducing security weakness through code.
Yeah, let me back up real quick and make a comment on this. It's
sure.
Like, so these things, there's thousands of things that you can do that will make you more secure, but right. they put these at the top of the list because here is a small definable set that if you can do this, man, you're gonna put yourself ahead as far as you can with like 10 things that you're going to be taken care of. And I think a way to look at it is like a car, 30 years ago, you were more likely to die in a crash without a seatbelt on, even though the cars had seatbelts. And so laws were passed requiring people to wear seatbelts, and now cars have airbags on them, and you can still die in a car crash and you still have a pretty decent chance of getting hurt or getting in a wreck, but they've mitigated some of the biggest risks to make it overall safer. And that's kind of the idea here. And I'm super happy. I don't know that these are necessarily, this is the top 10 things to do in no particular order, or these are the top 10 in the best order. But I personally really like the fact that the application developer guidance is first. And I'll tell you that every time we talk to a new vendor, I'm always on a Zoom call or a phone call with the person who's in charge, whether it's the CEO and it's a smaller company or whether it's a CTO. But I'm always asking questions about this particular, because I don't care how great and amazing their software is. If they're all willy-nilly about security practices, I don't want to use the software because that puts my company and my customers at risk. And the SolarWinds hack was most likely because of things that fall under this category. Could have been as simple as a programmer just leaving their computer for a few minutes. That little small amount of code was added that made a backdoor, and that got them the keys to the kingdom, to Microsoft, to some defense agency stuff, and all kinds of businesses out there. It's crucial right now that companies really become aware of application developer security controls. Whether that's you have software that monitors your software for all your changes, whether you're having a daily or hourly code huddle where you're talking about changes, things have to be in place. So, and then on top of that, things that are potentially backdoors and exploits, those things have to be watched for also. So you're not leaving your software vulnerable to either a vulnerability attack or a backdoor getting inserted. This is crucial because software runs everything that we do basically these days.
Yep. So I look at this, and I agree with all that. That was very thorough, and I'm not going to add to it, but I am going to say that two things that I see, right? There's companies out there that are they build software for that's their business. It's their core business. They develop software, they resell it, they sell it as a SaaS product or whatever. And those companies absolutely need to do a better job at this. I've seen tons of companies where they build great tools, but from a security standpoint, they're not so great. And these are companies that people buy from every day. And then you have this other subset of development going on in the business world where the company's core business is not software development. Let's say it's financial services, and they have somebody come along and build them something for their company so they can run their company. So they've had custom software built in their company that helps them run their business or do their business or generate business, what have you. And they may have hired that person one time 15 years ago, and they've been using that application ever since, and nobody's touched it, updated it, evaluated it, what have you. So this speaks to both, right? This speaks to the people who are, their core business is software development, but this also speaks to the companies that had custom software developed at some point for their business at some point in time, and they really don't have it maintained by anybody. It's just out there, right? And that's not really following these software best practices that are recommended. So if you're a business owner and you have that type of software that I described, maybe it was built on Microsoft Access, or maybe it was a web program that was built, or maybe it was just some client application that was built just for your company. You got to take a look at that piece of software, especially if it communicates through the internet or over the internet in any way, shape, or form, because it is susceptible to the types of attacks that we're talking about around this, and similar to what we saw with SolarWinds and Kaseya. So moving on, the next thing we have is user training, right? Train users to be aware of access manipulation attempts by an adversary to reduce the risk of successful spear phishing and social engineering.
This one is, they're all very important and they all work together in synergy, but your people that work for you are going to be your weakest link.
Yep.
And they need training to be aware. They need to be on their guard. You don't want them losing sleep at night over it, but they need to be aware that if something pops up, usually it's in the form of an email, something pops up, they need to be very cautious. And with training, it's been proven that they're less likely to click on things with training. So, this one is extremely important. I know that both of our companies have the ability to offer a basic user training like this, a security training like this to our customers. People need to have this in place at their business. some sort of security training that makes them more aware. Just because, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So we don't have a basic user awareness training offering. We have a very comprehensive user awareness training that's very effective.
I didn't mean it like that. I meant more, but yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I know you didn't. But the reality of it is it's very important, right? And you're going to hear a lot about companies developing or creating a culture of cybersecurity if you haven't already heard about that. And we've proven it in our own company with our clients and everyone we've deployed our solution around security and awareness training too, that it really does. Like, if you don't have a culture of cybersecurity in your business and you feel like there's no culture around security and keeping things secure, implement a user and awareness training program, one that's delivered regularly, like once a week, to people's inbox where they can watch videos and get educated, are the most effective ones that we see out there. And start letting this tool be the thing that builds that culture of cybersecurity. You don't know how many clients have called me after we've implemented something like this and told me, like, hey, I'm now hearing my employees talk about like phishing emails and this and that in the break room, at the water cooler, what have you. It really does start to build awareness and that spirit of, hey, we all have a role in this game for keeping our clients and our own data protected at our company. So anything else you want to add about that? Because
no, I love the term culture of cybersecurity, because that's really what it boils down to. Andre has chimed in on a few comments.
He's not allowed.
And talking about how important it is to mention this in your company, whether it's your morning huddles or wherever. It's talking about the need to be baked in. Needs to be baked in. It's not a tack on, it's something that's part of.
It's awesome if you have culture, but I know a lot of companies that don't, that don't have culture. And if you don't, even if you don't, emphasize culture in the same sense that maybe Randy and I and Andre are talking about it, you can at least do this to get a culture of cybersecurity built in your company. And it really, what I always say is no employee wants to be the person who caused ransomware in a company. Nobody wants to be that person. But if you're not educating them on what to look for and what to do if they do click on something, that's the other piece of this. Like, a lot of people, when they click on something or they open something, they feel shame or they feel embarrassed. So they close everything real quick and like, oh, look, nothing's on my screen. The big bad hacker's not here. Like, nothing happened. And they don't tell anybody. You can tell IT the minute you do that. IT can look into it right away and see if anything bad really did happen, and not find out a week later after ransomware is deployed. And then we realize that, Sally in marketing clicked on an email she shouldn't have clicked on. So
need to make sure there's no shame if something does happen, that you are able to go ahead and report it.
Exactly. So user account management, manage and the creation, modification, use, and permissions associated to user accounts.
Yeah, this is basically just being aware every time a new account is created, whether this is on your domain, whether this is on a computer, or whether this is on one of your SaaS accounts, like SaaS is software as a service. But like Microsoft 365, that's a SaaS account. And that means that the accounts are created in the cloud, quote unquote. And you want to be getting your security team or your security person or however it's set up needs to be aware, or your IT company needs to be aware whenever new accounts are added or they're modified. That way you've always got a picture of what's going on. And, if somebody creates a new admin account that you've never heard of and you don't know anything about, that's a bad sign. And it's good to know those things.
Yeah, 100%. You hit the nail on the head. I don't have much to add to that. You got to know when this stuff is happening. When, when I was mentioning earlier about the hash, thing that hackers like to do. Well, what they like to do is they like to basically take the hash from an admin account that's logged in on the network somewhere, and they take that hash and they move it over to another computer that they have compromised, and then they elevate the user account from a standard user to a admin on that system. And that can be done without knowing passwords, right? It's this whole hashing, the whole hashing thing I mentioned
Hash
earlier.
passing.
Yep. And all you got to do is, move that from one system to another. You don't need to know passwords. You just have to have control over the system to the point where, you can elevate an account where you have a machine compromised. When that user account gets elevated to an admin level, an alert should go off and somebody should be aware of it. Did somebody do that? Did somebody add that user to that admin group, or did a hacker just do it?
Exactly.
And that's what you need to go figure out, right? And that's the detect part of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and that's what a business owner needs to know here. Business owner is not going to be in the weeds knowing what accounts have what access and where, but as a business owner, there are tools out there that will tell you easily, and they're not expensive, whether or not these accounts are being manipulated or not. And
right.
Somebody who's in charge should be able to determine whether or not that was something that the IT team did, or wait, we might have a problem here.
Right. Yeah. And these two accounts, these two categories, the next one,
yep,
they really bleed together.
They do.
Because the privileged account management is along that same vein, like you said, getting alerts and notifications when it's escalated, but then also putting controls in place that if it does get escalated, that it even requires a verification right then and there to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I said on LinkedIn to Kevin Lancaster when he asked if you had $1 million to invest in a company, what would you do? And I said I'd take the $1 million and give them to all these RMM vendors and make them put MFA in other places besides the login. And the analogy the analogy that I used was like when I do anything inside of my accounting software, move money, anything related to moving money, I have to MFA. When I log in, I have to MFA. And when I move money, I have to MFA. It should be no different with RMMs when we're using system and root accounts to do mass changes across networks. There should be some kind of MFA involved to say, are you really here, like person doing this? And do you really want to do this? Because like deploying ransomware to your entire RMM and every endpoint in your RMM, there should be some kind of checks and balance to say, well, that's not really normal behavior.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, let's have a check here. And so, that's kind of one of the things I said is like, we need to have MFA in other places. And when you have something like an RMM tool that has this system level access, that's one thing that we really need to shore up. And not just in our industry, in other industries as well, with tools that have this capability. But yes, these two are very related. They go together. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this one because it's the same idea and it's the same tools and processes that you would monitor these accounts for any kind of changes or adjustments to how they are really intended to be set up on your network. So,
right.
Password policies. I'm just going to preface this before you go, Randy, and say this is probably the number one way that we see breaches. Poor password management and poor password enforcement and the lack of a password manager and password reuse. So go ahead.
Yeah. So we may want to consider, since we're about 50 minutes into this, maybe we save the rest of these for next week. Not sure.
That's fine. Yeah.
Or keep going. It's up to you. But on the password policies, yeah. So there's actually, this, but for our audience out there, there's actually, like, as we speak, are millions, probably billions of username and password combinations that are for sale on the dark web. Some are even available for free. And so a password policy not only helps protect against that, but just the whole idea that you have a password that's secure, like saying password backwards and putting a $sign on the back, like that's not secure. Password 1 is not secure. 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, that's not secure. But not only is it not secure, those passwords are all, readily for sale and or freely available on the dark web. And so you need policies in place for all your passwords, like minimum length, complexity, things like that. And then you also need to have your passwords need to be compared to a known database of leaked, passwords that are available out there. And so then, like, if you pick a password and it's been leaked out there, you can change it, because like you're saying, this is a way for people to get breached. This is a way for people to get into your Facebook, or into other sorts of social media,
into your VPN.
Yeah, and then use that to get more and more.
Well, that's exactly how the pipeline got hacked. Colonial Pipeline
was how
they had that legacy VPN that was left out there, and they had a username and password from I believe it was an ex-employee, active account that was left active, and the password was on the dark web, and they used that to get in.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the other thing too is although the tools that we have are really good for giving us this information, these tools don't look at every nook and cranny in the dark web. So while we may know a significant number of passwords that are out there, we're not seeing them all. We're not seeing everything that's being shared on the dark web through these tools that bring this up. And many of you may be familiar with, like, your credit monitoring has like dark web monitoring, and they basically pretty much go to the same databases to pull this information. So that's what I'm talking about. Like those where you get the alerts from your credit monitoring company, or maybe your IT company sends you alerts that tells you your password, this password was found on the dark web. I would venture to say that we probably only know about 30% of what's really out there. So it's important that people have that. So, dude, we are like almost an hour in. I don't care if you want to finish. We can spend 5 minutes on each one and just blow through these.
Okay. Let me add to that. What you were just saying is, sure, I would highly encourage that you use some sort of a password program to help you store your passwords, and also to generate random passwords. Like every password that I use now, I'm generating, in the 30 and 40 and 50 character level. I had to sign up for something today. They limited me to 32 characters, but there's no way. Like, I literally just talked to somebody yesterday who had concern that they had their social media had been hacked, and every single password they had was in their head. They weren't using any kind of a password manager. They weren't using any kind of a password generator. Like that's got to change. We've got to move away from easy to remember short passwords that we've been using forever, because we end up using them on a multitude of accounts. And we've got to move towards randomly generated ones. So we want to blow through these real quick.
Yeah, if you're not using a password manager at this point, man, you're in trouble. You got to use one. You can't use the same password across multiple sites. You're just waiting for someone to target you and hack you when the next, site gets compromised.
Any second now, literally.
Yeah, like LinkedIn gets hacked today, and maybe somebody's already targeting you. And look, I got so and so's password now. Let me go into his bank account. Let me try to log into his VPN. Let me try this. Let me try that. And that's how it happens. And don't use password. Don't think you're tricking anybody by using passwords that are kind of sort of different, but not really. They have tools that run through variations very quickly and crack all that kind of stuff. So, password managers, totally random. String of characters is the only way to go. I used to recommend like sentences. I run fast or something like that, changing a couple letters. That doesn't even work anymore. So,
right.
So network segmentation, this is a little nerdy, so let's not get too deep in the weeds here. If I'm a business owner, how are you going to explain network segmentation to me, Randy?
I mean, I'm gonna explain it like, I'm gonna go back to the car analogy. So in a car, you have You have fuel, which is explosive and dangerous. You also have an engine that creates high temperatures. You have a passenger department where your most precious cargo is. You have another area for other cargo. Those things are all separated by design. And so, like, if there's a leak in your gas tank, it's not going to instantly light you on fire inside your car. Your engine overheats to the point of spewing out hot water. It's not going to harm you in the passenger department. We have to think about that with our security. And it's not just like literal actual networks. That's important. But even then, in our different areas of security, like multi-factor authentication, our password keeper, things like that, when you segment, you slow down the criminals, and it gives you a little bit more of a chance of stopping them, discovering them, and coming out on top, if you will. And I think I mentioned this in a podcast a few months ago. Very, very large financial company here in my area, I won't go into any more details than that, was hit by a tragic BIOS infecting malware. They had their company was segmented. That whole department, they just basically threw away all the computers and bought a new one. And if they hadn't been segmented, it would have taken over the entire company, because it had lateral movement capabilities, and the computers were no longer usable unless you replaced the motherboards on them. So bottom line was that segmentation protected the rest of the company.
And I think it's important to point out to anyone who doesn't know, who's listening, that when hackers get onto the network, they don't just go and deploy ransomware right away. It could be weeks before they deploy ransomware, right? They're in there trying to find data, trying to learn who you are, trying to learn, what your company does, how much revenue you have, so they know what they can negotiate for an amount on a ransom. But the other thing that they're doing is they're looking for your backups. And they're looking to destroy those backups before they deploy the ransomware, so they have a better chance of getting paid. That's why we recommend making sure you have your backups segmented on another network that you can only get to from a few locations. Maybe one machine in your network where you can get to that backup location, or maybe you can't get to it at all from inside your network. So one of the things I would absolutely recommend that you check with your IT team on, Mr. Business Owner, is you ask them if our backups are on the same network as everything else, or are they segmented. So, if a hacker gets on our network, they can't easily get to it and destroy it. So I'm going to leave it at that. And then we're going to move into NIP, Network Intrusion Prevention. So this is a perimeter type thing. Getting in, busting down the front door from the outside, breaking through that firewall. Configure network intrusion prevention systems to block malicious file signatures and file types at the network boundary. So in a nutshell, this is just saying, make sure you have something on your firewall that's scanning the network traffic that's going over that firewall, in case, a hacker is inside and he wants to start downloading really bad tools to do really bad stuff on your network. Your firewall should be able to find this stuff and pick it up and block it. Anything else you want to add?
That's basically it. And I would also add to that your firewall should be, from a port standpoint, should be whitelist only. So both ways, in and out.
Allow list.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Everything is blocked if it's not allowed.
Yep.
That way, in and out. And a lot of firewalls come out of the box that small businesses use. They come out of the box configured to allow everything out. And then, just by the nature of the way they're set up, they block things coming in. But you got to be more proactive than that. You can't just rely on that. And if one of these things that they mentioned, the file signature, malicious file, if one of those does get in, then you want to have it blocked where they can't phone home from the inside, if possible.
If you're going to hire and pay a professional to do anything inside of your network to protect your business, this would be something I would highly recommend. You hire somebody to install and set up your firewall, because it's very easy to set one of these things up incorrectly, and it's going to cause you to have a bad day one day. So,
yep.
All right. So disable or remove feature, or program. Remove or deny access to unnecessary and potentially vulnerable software to prevent abuse by adversaries. What does that mean?
Man, if you've got any software on your computers in your company that you're not using, just get rid of it. And if you're like a software developer, or if you use software, the things that you're not using, the components of that you don't use, just disable them.
Yep.
Because what you're doing is you're basically limiting your surface of attack, if you will, because you may have some PDF reader that's like 12 years out of date, that's some no-name brand that you used like 12 years ago, and maybe they could exploit that against you. You may have something that's running on your computer that there's a known exploit for, that they can use that to gain privilege access, to your machine. Bottom line, if you don't need it, just uninstall it, disable it, get rid of it.
Yep. There's a thing inside of the same place. People don't know this, but there's a lot of things that run on Windows that most average users don't need to have running. And if you go to the same spot in Windows where you uninstall software, there's a little link on the left-hand side that says turn Windows features on or off. And if you click that, a box pops up and there's all these little check boxes that you can check on or off, and you'll see that a lot of them are checked. There's a lot of things in there that I wouldn't recommend any average user go do this. Have somebody who knows what they're doing go through this and evaluate what you need and what you don't need. But the best thing you can have a security professional do, if you have a team or have somebody that works on this, is have them go through all your systems and start evaluating whether or not you can disable functions within Windows that don't need to be there, that could potentially be abused by a hacker down the road.
Exactly.
So that's it. All right, so moving on. Antivirus, anti-malware. I like to call it endpoint protection because that sounds antivirus, anti-malware sounds like old school to me. But maintain antivirus, anti-malware software up to date and configured to recognize and remove malicious files that have been downloaded or created on the host.
I mean, I think most people are going to be familiar with this. This is what is most often associated with security, and things have changed. We need to watch for a lot more than we used to watch for, but still, bottom line, we still need an antivirus, anti-malware running on the machines. I would highly discourage against most free versions of this.
What about Defender? What are your thoughts on Defender? Windows.
So I like having Defender as like another layer potentially. But I'm not comfortable yet to rely on it. Years ago, I was a huge fan of it. Then they just kind of quit doing great at it, and then they started doing great at it again. So I'm kind of up in the air. I'm not ready to put my trust into it yet, but it can be helpful in other things and other layers of things. Having it on a computer, if you've got software that can control it and make it do this or that for you for your advantage, then it's a great thing to have there, kind of as another layer. Though I'm not ready yet to just rely on it. So
and just understand, folks, that not all antivirus, anti-malware is created equal. You really want to be looking for something that's called advanced endpoint protection. That has things like AI built into it, heuristics, which is basically means like the software can figure out that something's bad, even if it doesn't have the exact signature that it's looking for. There's a lot of better features with an advanced endpoint protection product than, Norton antivirus or, Avast free or whatever else is out there today. I don't even know. But important to have it on there, even if you run a Mac, even if you run Linux, even though there's no viruses for Linux, you should still have things monitored. Definitely on any endpoint, you should have endpoint protection. Because quite frankly, when you go to a hotel or you go somewhere and you decide to connect your computer to that laptop, even though or that Wi-Fi, even though you really shouldn't, when you do, there's no firewall protecting you. And that endpoint protection is really your only line of defense in those types of situations. So I'm not sure if people are aware of that. So last thing we're going to cover here before we wrap up, which we didn't do too bad, an hour and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Periodically perform software updates, including vendor patches, OS updates, and firmware upgrades to mitigate exploitation risk. So let's break this up just like they did. What's a vendor patch?
So a vendor patch is going to be your third-party software, like your specifically and especially like your Adobe software, which there's Adobe software on almost every computer that is out there. But your Adobe software, your QuickBooks programs, there's basically any software that people use that's not part of the Windows operating system is most likely going to have updates that are put out for it. Yep. The thing is about this is we run across people sometimes who feel like they can do this on their own, and that's so like disconcerting, almost disturbing, because there's no way that really you can keep up with this, because some of these things they might put them out once a month, they might put them out every day, they might find a vulnerability today that's actively being exploited, and so they put out an update today. I mean, I don't know, man. I think that this needs to be automated. This is something that definitely needs to be automated, and I wouldn't encourage people to try to just do it on their own.
I agree with the next one, with the OS updates. Depending on your business, vendor patches can be difficult or not. But OS updates, I mean, Windows puts out updates every couple of days at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you manage that? And then, you and I know that the updates don't go so well sometimes. You have to pull patches, you have to uninstall them because printing stops working, and all the annoying stuff that goes along with Windows updates. But that's what they're talking about here. OS updates. Windows isn't the only operating system that needs to get updated. Every one of them needs to get updated. Mac puts out updates very frequently. I think every time I fire up my Linux, it updates. I mean, you have to run commands to update it, but as soon as I fire up on my Linux, I update it right away. So every operating system has updates, and you need to make sure that this stuff is getting done, because, as we see, a lot of attacks that we've seen recently are around 0 days. And I think we're going to see more and more 0 days, because that's going to be, a lot of times if you're taking care of all this stuff and you're putting all these speed bumps in the road, making it difficult for hackers to fly through your network and do damage, the 0 days are the only way that they're going to really get in there, because, we're getting ahead of this stuff quicker and quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got firmware upgrades. What are they talking about there?
So they're going to be talking about firmware updates for maybe your firewall, your wireless access points. I mean, pretty much anything that accesses the internet.
Your Ring doorbell, your smart light bulb, your smart light switch, your Amazon Alexa, your Google Home, what else do they have?
I'm not sure. I don't use Google Home, and I don't
Google
use
Home, Amazon Alexa. There's Amazon Fires. There's smart TVs, which I talked about before. That they pretty much stop updating smart TVs after like a year and a half. So pretty much, if you haven't bought a new TV in the last 2 years and it's a smart TV and it's connected to the internet, it probably has a vulnerability that can be exploited.
Mm-hmm.
PlayStations, they kind of update themselves, but they have firmware updates. When your kid's annoyed that his PlayStation has to update for a half hour, that's what it's doing. A lot of times, just so people know, with smart light bulbs and smart switches, depending on the brand, a lot of times you have to go into the app and you have to go into the little 3 bars at the top and click it and go to settings, and it'll sit there and say you have firmware updates that need to be run. So it doesn't just happen on its own a lot of times. Some things you can schedule it to happen automatically. I would still go in and check and make sure that they're actually happening automatically, because sometimes you'll go in and go, oh, wow, I had that set to update automatically, but it hasn't updated it in a year. Right?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, and then I would say, like, going back to the category about disabling or removing features or programs, like, if you have a vacuum cleaner that comes with internet access and a camera on it, maybe you don't really need that. Maybe if you can just push the button and it does what it needs to do, maybe you don't need to connect it to your network.
It mapped my whole house. It's got to be connected to the internet. It knows where to go based on that. Like,
well, yeah,
I don't want to
store that
my shoes.
So what server is it storing that map of your house on? You know, if it's not storing it internally, is it putting it up in a in a risky country on a risky server, where they don't care about security as much as we do. I mean, just some thoughts.
Or the product was intentionally designed to collect that information.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Right. It could be any of those things, right? And people need to understand that when they buy technology, you might want to check where it was manufactured, where's the technology at when, I need to update this thing. Where am I calling out to? Am I calling out to the United States? Am I calling out to another country? Where does this country operate out of? There's a lot of things that you can evaluate before you decide to buy a particular light bulb. And I caution people to not buy like the smart bulbs and the smart switches that connect to the internet and are constantly connected to your network and your internet just based on price alone. Right. So, you're looking for a bunch of LED bulbs for your house, and you go on Amazon, you find, 6-pack of LED bulbs for $18, and you're like, oh, bam. You know what I mean? And you just found out that you bought bulbs that were already deprecated by the manufacturer. They're no longer going to be updated. And now you just introduced 6 devices in your home that can be now exploited by a cyber criminal. Right. So, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's the world we live in today. And that's all I have for this week, Randy.
Yeah. Pretty talked out myself.
All right, boss. Everybody, we appreciate you sticking with us. Remember, share out our show to your friends and family. It's the only thing we ask. It's the only fee that we have for delivering this content to you. Exciting news. We have acquired securitysquawk.com domain name. So we're going to have a website very soon to kind of have one location for all this stuff and links out to where you can download us, and probably have places where you can submit questions through that website. So we have questions from the audience that we can take to the show and answer for you. But for now, just head over to our social media spots, either on YouTube or Facebook. Find one of our posts, drop a comment. We answer questions all the time from there. So we want to thank you. We'll see you next week. Stay safe out there. Take care.